Welcome to the V2V podcast with Aurelius. That's me. And with me today is Lily Spearbrecker?
Spearbrecker, yes.
Got it. And today we're talking with Lily about, in general, the what's known as the troubled teen industry. There's an organization called WASP, the Worldwide Association of Special Programs. And we're going to discuss what that is in general and maybe more specifically her experiences as a teenager in these programs. And it's an opportunity to let people know kind of what's really going on in this kind of isolated world of teenage life that many people aren't aware of. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here.
So I guess the best way to start this off is to kind of have you explain for our listeners what it is that we're talking about. What is the troubled teen industry?
Well, the troubled teen industry is obviously it's an industry of teens that are troubled, but they're in boarding schools. They're boarding schools, residential treatment centers, boot camps, wilderness programs. These places take quote-unquote troubled kids and try to rehabilitate them into becoming functioning members of society. While it sounds all great, that's really not what happens.
So I guess it does sound like reasonable, like just on those terms, because I get, people are familiar with adult rehabs, which have the problems of their own, but generally speaking, they're looked at as a positive thing, if not a tragic thing, or at least there's some hope there, like the down and out, we hear about like the down and out celebrity who's going back to rehab, like the Charlie Sheen type, or
right.
The tragic story of someone like Amy Winehouse who chose not to go to rehab, so to speak, right? And and when we know people, we ourselves, speaking generally, suffer from addiction, substance abuse problems. So we're aware of the idea of therapy, and it seems reasonable to want to take care of your child, and send them to these places with shiny brochures and nice people to talk to and a good sales pitch.
That's essentially what it is.
So what really happens? It's the sales pitch, right? So I guess give us a kind of a rundown of how it works. What's the approach?
Well, what happens is a teenager, acting out. Parent looks up online. How do I save my kid? What do I do? Then they come across educational consultants. And what these consultants do is they actually take kickbacks from the program. So they're not really sending your kid to the best of the best programs that's going to save their life. What it's doing is they're actually having you send your kid to a place that they got money from. So, and then you look at the brochures and everything looks great and the kids look happy and they're smiling and oh my gosh, it's just amazing. And most of the time, parents just fall right into that. But that's the complete opposite of what actually happens. I mean, the parents sometimes come to the facilities, they do a walkthrough. Only specific kids are chosen to talk to the parents, ones that have been brainwashed and programmed enough to be like, oh yeah, this place is great for your kid. And then, of course, if the parent approves, then the kid will be sent to the program, and it's much
all right.
what I hear from there.
All right. Let me stop you there for a second. So the quote unquote out of control kid, like, this brings to mind an article, and I don't recall if you sent it, but it was about a young man who recently escaped from a facility in Utah, and I guess he was 13, grabbed some water and took off across the desert. And then there was, of course, a big search party, and later on, I guess that afternoon, they found him on the side of the road, hungry but safe and not in
I
any
read that article.
mortal danger. So in reading this, the last line of this little article was that he was going to be sent back to a facility with better security. Like that was the ultimate solution to the kid running away. And I know that there are children who are legitimately misbehaving, I guess, but I kind of take the approach that it's overblown. I mean, kids are kids, and the majority of children act like children, and they're disrespectful, and they're obstinate, and they don't listen.
Well,
and they try
absolutely.
things.
That's what being a normal teenager is. You're
Sure.
finding yourself in this weird, crazy world. You're trying to figure out who you are. That's what it is to be a teenager. And it seems like parents have forgotten what it was like to be a teenager. I mean, unless your kid's like shooting up neighborhoods or something very extreme, I mean, smoking some marijuana once in a while. Right.
Sure. Now, there's a differentiation here that we should make, is that if your child is committing crimes, we know what that system looks like. I mean, everybody knows what that looks like. And everybody knows what it is. Like, you can see it because the kid's bringing home things he stole from the store or whatever it is. And even at that point, the solution doesn't seem reasonably to be to ship your kid off to a boarding school. Because normally what the popular conception of a boarding school is some stuffy, strict place that rich people send their kids to. But that's not what we're talking about. So getting back to this 13-year-old, it just made me wonder, because there was nothing in the article. Now perhaps it's because of HIPAA laws, or, because these are pseudo-medical facilities, that they couldn't disclose, like, why he was there in the first place.
Yeah,
but the picture of the kid was, it just was so like, well, what the heck did this guy do? He was wayward, whatever that means,
Runaway teen, bad teen. And let me just say that if a kid runs away in the desert, and, he knows, because he's out in that area for a little while, so he knows what can happen being out in the desert.
Right.
Obviously, he grabbed some water, so he knows.
Right.
If he ran out and risked the elements to get away from that facility, then there's obviously something going on there.
And apparently, whatever they were doing there, did you talk about how long he had been there?
No, I didn't see how long he was.
But obviously, whatever the quote-unquote therapy that was going on, apparently, regardless of who he was or what he did, it wasn't working. If he had the bravery to run through the desert, there's something missing here that we don't know about. And maybe you're in a position to fill us in about what goes on. Like, once you get the sales pitch, once you ship your kid off, and whether it's paid for insurance, so you've got enough money to pay the $5,000 a month or whatever the case is.
Well, and I do want to touch on real quick again on the boy before I jump over into the next portion of what happened. Is another thing regarding him is when it hits a certain point, you will do whatever you have to do to get out of a situation. And that goes for kids, adults, abused people, you know, like domestic violence, all that. You will do whatever you have to do to get away. I have gone through a similar situation regarding programs, so I know exactly what this boy was going through. So I get it.
Right.
But after it happens with the sales pitch and you drop your kid off, what happens is your kid 9 times out of 10 is strip searched. All the stuff is gone through.
Right.
Most of it they can't have. And then they're just shoved in this group of kids, you know, be it boys or girls, you know, depending. They typically keep the boys and girls separated. And then they put you with a hope buddy or somebody to show you kind of the ropes of the program. So that's where when you learn all the rules and what you can and cannot do, how to walk, how to talk, pretty much just how to basically survive during your time there.
Right. And I was watching, I watched, I guess it's an unfinished movie called Fix My Kid, or it's not quite done. I saw a kind of a sneak preview of this a couple weeks ago, and in that
is that
case,
the one involving Straight?
Yeah, right.
I haven't
it was
seen
just,
that
it was
one
Straight
yet.
Incorporated, right? And in this case, essentially, the older kids ran the place, while the adult staff kind of stood back.
Oh yeah.
Is that pretty typical that it's more peer to peer? Like,
yes.
So you have the pressure of conforming, and then you have the pressure of making sure that the newcomers conform. So the older kids are really trapped in the middle of the adult authority and making sure that they're getting the younger kids to comply, so they don't get leveled down back to
pretty much. Yeah.
Right. That's I would consider that to be a really severe form of abuse. Just on the surface, right? Because it's so coercive. And that word keeps coming up.
And
That's
but
therapy.
you have it so these kids are pretty much counseling other kids, not therapy, right? Also,
right.
What happens is there becomes an extreme lack of trust between everyone in the facility. None of the kids end up trusting each other because they turn against each other real quick to make, because let's say I was in the program right now and I saw somebody break a rule. Now, I would have to tell on that person, because if I didn't tell on that person and somebody saw me see that particular situation, I would get in trouble for not reporting it.
Right. Right.
So there is no trust between the students. And obviously there's no trust between staff and students, because the staff just think you're a manipulative brat, so to speak. And the kids don't trust them because the staff control everything.
Well, isn't that ironic? Because basically what the system is teaching the kids to do is to be a manipulative brat. Oh,
that's exactly what it is.
Right.
I mean, they're trying to counter that, but what it ends up being is it makes the kid distrustful. It makes them stay to themselves more, isolated. It makes them have to be more sneaky. I mean, you learn a whole bunch of new ways to do things.
Sure. There's people are, here's some interesting knowledge, like, different creatures are good at different things. Like, bats have echolocation. They can ping sounds off of surfaces in the dark and see where they're going. Dogs, in general, can smell really well. They have thousands of more receptors in their noses, so that they can smell things better than other animals can. People, interestingly, what we're best at, better than any other animal, is we're really, really good at facial recognition. Like if someone walks by you and you make eye contact and see that person, chances are that if a year later you see that person again, you might not know where you saw them, but you know that you've seen that person before. We're really, really, really good at that. And the other thing we're really, really good at is getting used to things better than any other living thing. We're really, really good at getting used to things. So this leads me to my next question, that as all of this program is happening and people are getting acclimated and kind of fostered into this it's just, I can't even barely say it, this therapeutic boarding school program, right?
I know, I cringe when I say it too.
that eventually, and this is something that Bill shed some light on, is that over time, as we do, we get used to it, and familiarity also breeds a kind of contentment, a kind of normality.
Yeah, you get comfortable.
You get comfortable in it. So then there's that other phase where you buy in, and maybe some more than others, but eventually, if you keep leveling up, whether you really want to or not, you kind of buy into the system, so that you are now kind of quote unquote accountable as far as the facility is concerned. And
well, what a lot of kids do is they have this fake it till you make it.
Right.
So they pretend to buy into it, but they really don't.
And that's another torturous thing too, of course, because
it is.
Because you're torn constantly between wanting to just be yourself and knowing that you have to toe the line, or some unknown other bad thing is going to happen to you. Right. Or known thing, because you've seen it happen. Maybe you may have even participated in force or coercion with another child, or sure.
I personally refused to when I was there. I didn't get
right.
past
I'm talking about
two.
like the holding, the holding down of people and the screaming in the face and all of that stuff. Right.
Yep.
Because that happens too, certainly. I think people should be aware.
Oh yeah, that absolutely happens.
That it is a really brutal environment, and it shouldn't be sugarcoated or kind of pushed under the rug. That these are really vicious places, run by really money hungry, horrible people. Not the children, but the people who actually own and run these places.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And we could go on and on about Litchfield and all of that too, but I think that would kind of divert us a little bit from the reality of kind of what happens, not necessarily who's running it, because that may be for another show, another conversation. But so as these kids get acclimated to the program, they get used to it, they buy in or half buy in. Then I guess at a certain point, they age out or graduate. They're quote unquote better. So
pretty much, either the kid gets pulled, which is very rare. The kid graduates, or the kid turns 18 and leaves.
Right. So typically, what's the story after? Because we know the kid was quote unquote out of control before he went there. We know he was misbehaving, so to speak, and the parents threw their hands up and said, "Please take my kid. He's out of control."
Well, I mean, that's all.
Right.
I mean, that's all really subjective.
Sure,
let's be honest here. I knew a girl who was put in the program. She was already there for 2 years while I was there, so she originally got sent when she was 13. I met her when she was 15.
Right.
I asked her, why was she there for so long? Like, why was she in the program? And she said, my dad thought I was too dependent on him.
Right, and that's why I put that out of control into quotes. Sure.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, or the the misbehaving, I don't know if you could feel it, but I was putting that in finger quotes.
Right, well, I feel you. But I mean, for everybody who's listening, like this is like, it really depends. I mean, because there are kids that obviously do need some form of placement. But then there are
Right.
kids where they spend too much time on the computer and their parents don't like it, so they send them away.
Or they just, don't want to bother. I mean, I've heard situations like that too, where it's just like, oh, we can afford to send our kid away. Or, there's any number of reasons, but I guess ultimately, regardless of why, it's what and how that matters.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If you have a kid with a problem, or you think they do, or they might, or they obviously do, or you're just not sure, a therapeutic boarding school of this type doesn't seem like the place to be, because what happens when these young adults leave? And when they go back out into the world, what typically happens? I think that's the next step.
Well, what happened for me personally, I was terrified to leave my house for weeks. I was afraid of my friends because, all of my friends were apparently no good. Like, I could not hang out with none of them because they were just terrible and not on board with the program. I was just essentially terrified to be back among normal people. And it was weird because everybody was wandering around like nothing happened. And I'm like, what?
Well,
like,
from
you
their
guys
point
not
of
know?
view, well, no, right, they didn't know. From their point of view, nothing happened. Like, you were gone. They didn't, I imagine they didn't understand.
My friends actually thought I was dead. My friends thought my dad killed me.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
How'd they come to that conclusion?
Well, me and my father, it's a bad, it used to be. It's a very abusive relationship. So,
right.
I grew up getting my butt handed to me constantly.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And, so while you think that me escaping that situation would have been very awesome, it only made matters worse.
Sure.
And then what happens when a child leaves the program and they're deprogrammed? Because you're programmed while you're in there and you're brainwashed. And you come out and you're trying to go and mold back into society and find your footing because you literally lost however much time sitting in a school and not growing up with society and how you should. I personally suffer from PTSD, an extreme anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, borderline personality disorder, which is a coping disorder, not a multiple personality disorder. Do you have a problem coping with stress? I am actually disabled now because of these issues. Because of the schools that I went to and the amount of abuse that I had gone through, I am now disabled and unable to work to take care of me and my children. Right.
Right. And that's kind of what I meant, is that once you leave this coercive, structured environment and you go back out into the real world, you can't function in the way that you did there. And so you're at an extreme, get to be at an extreme loss regarding, like, really just what to do. Like even, just practically, like, well, what am I supposed to do now? Because my friends either think, they thought I was dead, or they thought I was weird, or they thought I, had, who knows what people were saying about it.
And if they thought you were weird before you went in, they definitely think you're weird after you got out because you're completely different.
Right, completely different, right. And so you have to, once again, relearn a system, but in this case, of course, the system that you need to learn is reality. Like,
pretty much, yeah.
Because the way the world works is the way the world works outside, not in, program fashion. You can't go around coercing people to do what you want to do. They just won't. I mean, that's not the way things work, or it's just not. It's even hard to express, like how jarring that must have been, and I can empathize with the disability aspect, because frankly, why wouldn't you be? Having gone through that.
It's tough.
I can imagine.
But, how I deal with my stuff is, I own and operate my website, so I help save kids from going in. I've talked to a lot of parents. I've saved a lot of children. I helped with the investigation that shut down the boarding school in Midwest Academy in Keokuk, Iowa. That's one of the places I was at. So I guess out of some good, I hate to even say it that way, has come out of my horrible experience, because now I'm able to help other kids.
Right. Well, you just have this special knowledge of a reality that most people don't understand, and the reason I wanted to do these series of interviews with survivors, or as I put it in the first interview with Bill Boyles, what the lawyer and child advocate Andrew Vax calls you folks transcenders, because you survived, and now you're able to help stop that cycle. And so it's really a blessing that comes through, like, the forged fire of trauma. And it's the only thing that we can do. I have experiences of my own in cult situations that I can relate to kind of where you're coming from, especially about the isolation and mind control stuff. I got coerced or tricked into becoming a part of Scientology when I was a teenager, and and it's similar, but I was 18. I was essentially an adult, a young adult, and all of these things that you described, aside from the like the physical stuff, I went through as well to some degree. It's a bit different, but
these programs are pretty much cults. That's what it's like. It is an accurate comparison to compare them to cults.
Well, if you go down like kind of the checklist of what a cult is, pretty much everything can be ticked off. Like in the first one, is hey, how you're the most wonderful person ever, and then shortly after that, it's if you leave, you're going to die, kind of thing.
Yep.
So
that's what they tell parents. If your kid doesn't tell the parents, your kid will die. They told that to my parents.
Right. The initial pitch is that your kid has so much promise. We love him. We love her. She's got a lot of problems, but we have the cure. We can make her better. And then, and
all the while they're telling that to the parents. The kids are in the school, and they're telling the kids like how much their parents hate their guts, and how much their parents don't want them. And we're like, oh yay, so great. And now they just ship me off here until I'm 18. So.
Well, these are really important points to get out, and I don't want them to slip by, but like, but yeah, there's all of this double talk going on, like, and from the institution itself, and then that's taught to the kids to put on that happy face when it's time, to visit, and you've got all this other peer pressure involving oh, you better you better put on a good show. You better stand up straight and smile and make us look good because this is what they paid for. They didn't pay for you to come here so that you could be miserable. So snap to it. All that good stuff. Sure.
Well, they tell you. I mean, this is what they told me when I was in CASA when they were taking pictures of us. Mm-hmm. They said, your parents aren't going to pull you just because you look miserable, so you might as well make them happy and just smile.
Gotcha. Right. No. Even more so, of course they wouldn't pull you if you're miserable. They'd want you to stay. And if you're happy, they want you to stay.
Yep. It's like no matter what you
do. It works both ways. Like, oh, look at my child. They're doing so well. Let's keep them here. Oh no, look how sad he is. He must not be. He must need more therapy. Let's keep him here. Sure.
Yep, that's how it happens.
I guess it is how it happens. I'd like to.
And I hate to laugh about it, but that's like
no.
It's
gallows humor.
Insane
really.
To even
sure. It's insane to even think that's possible. That people can be so manipulative and cruel.
If I saw one of my kids just absolutely miserable, I'd be like, something's wrong here.
Right.
And I would rush, to my children.
Of course.
Then again, if my child told me that there was some abuse going on, I would believe my child. So.
Right. There's a thing regarding parents with the best intentions getting trapped into a pattern of guilt or shame.
Yeah.
Regarding sending their children there, they can't. Well, or it can be really difficult to ultimately admit that they made a bad choice because what it does is it labels the parent to themselves as bad. And
yes.
They don't want to do that to themselves.
My father holds a lot of guilt for what happened. Right. And he cannot move past it. And no matter how many times that I tell him, that it's not his fault. He got conned. You know what I mean? They had an absolute amazing con job. And he fell for it. And that's not his fault. And
right.
But he holds so much guilt because his daughter, his only child, he sent her away to be abused, pretty much. And it breaks my heart for my dad. It really does.
Yeah, for sure. Because that's the side of the often that's the side of the conversation that doesn't necessarily get told about like what happens to the parents, when they realize or
some parents don't. Some parents still go on believing. They still think that, if it wasn't for the program, you'd be dead by now. But then there are some that wake up and they feel the guilt.
Even if, and it's a big if, even if there were positive results, like the means to the end it doesn't justify it. No, it doesn't justify it. There are different ways to do things, and are there? I mean, this might be a difficult question to answer because I'm not aware. But are there good programs?
I'm sure that there probably are good facilities out there, but the problem is all the marketing is the same, so you can't really tell. And are you really willing to risk it? You know what I mean? Like that's what it ultimately comes down to. Are you really willing to risk your child's mental health and safety just to, hey, let's give it a try, with my child, my human life that I created. Let's just hope it makes it better.
Right. I guess ultimately, parenthood is difficult, of course, and
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I got a 9-year-old, and he challenges me every day, but I still wouldn't dream about sending him away.
Right, but there's a measure of
accountability. See his face every day.
Of course, and there's a measure of accountability that comes along with the privilege of having and raising a child. Like,
exactly.
You know, like, it's, the language is difficult to like articulate, but really you must raise your child. Like, and there are many ways
that's what
to do
happened.
that.
I got pregnant and I was like, hey, I want to keep my baby, so I'm going to raise it.
Right.
I'm not going to pay anybody else to raise it. I'm going to raise it. So. Right,
and it sounds like a black and white thing, like you're obligated to raise a child. But there are many ways to do that. There are, parenting styles of all kinds. But
absolutely.
I think it can be safe to say that regardless of what kind of trouble your young adolescent or teenager is in, it's probably not the best choice, as we understand why, to just ship them off somewhere. You're responsible as a parent to do something, and abdicating responsibility, even, and it's frustrating, frankly. But yeah.
Welcome to my world. It's extremely frustrating to try to explain these things without insulting somebody. And because you're not trying to insult them, you're just trying to, you're trying to help. So it's very difficult to find the right words sometimes to say.
Sometimes it is. I guess the best thing that we've done here with this conversation is just put the word out a little bit more, maybe put this on someone's radar screen so that if they are thinking about sending their child to a place like this, to give it a second thought, talk to people, seek out different alternatives, go there, and do some investigation.
Well, even if you go there, they just put on a face, pretty much.
Oh, of course. But that's that's the obligation. Going back to that, like, don't blindly send your kid to a place you don't know what's going on at, because the results could be devastating.
Exactly. And the biggest thing that I preach is research. Research. If you can't find something, contact one of the advocates. Contact somebody at WASP Survivor. Contact me at Safe Teen Schools. We will help you figure something out. Not to put your kid in a boarding school, but there are other options. There are therapies. There, in home, like at home in your community therapy.
Sure.
Sure. If you're looking at a specific boarding school, like I have parents contact me all the time, and they're like, "Oh, I'm looking at this particular boarding school. Do you have any information on it?" And I'm like, "Absolutely." Right. So I go and I look through and I do research and I send them all of the nitty-gritty details. And they're like, "Oh my God, thank you. You just saved my kid. I was going to send him." And I'm like, "You're welcome."
Cool.
So, I mean, if anybody has questions, just contact somebody.
Right. And we'll put your website in the show notes, and so that people can contact you if they would like to, and we'll get all that information out there. We'll be this.
I got to plug my website.
Oh, of course you have to plug your website, and we'll replug it and blast it out there again for sure. Like,
I appreciate it.
That's what it's all about. It's about getting this information out there, trying to be objective as possible, telling true stories about what really goes on in this world.
And what better of a person to hear it from than somebody who's been in the shoes of a child who has been in these places.
That's right. And
I'm almost 30 years old now, and I'm still dealing with my PTSD and my nightmare. Am I boring you?
No, not at all. What
so, I sounded like you yawned.
Oh, no, I said that was a woo. That was like a
Oh. I was
no,
like,
no,
oh my
no,
goodness,
no
I'm
yawning.
boring him.
No yawning allowed. No,
That's right.
This is certainly not boring. I was getting a little worked up a few minutes ago. I was like pacing around the room. I'm not. No, I'm not bored at all.
Me too. I'm standing outside and I was pacing as well.
This is really good. You were really informative. I'm sure there's lots that we missed, but I believe in
there's a lot of stuff to cover in that short amount of time. So
sure.
It's a lot.
In a couple of days, in a couple of days, I have the other side of the story. I have a interview coming up with a parent.
Oh, really? That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it when parents step forward.
So that should be really, really interesting. And, because all of these, as we go on, talking to different people, and if people are really listening, which I hope they do, I think they'll find these commonalities between the overlapping stories, whether it's the survivor or a parent. Hopefully, I can find some staff defectors, or people who've worked in these places who would be willing.
I think I might have somebody for you.
Okay, because it's the best way to get a comprehensive picture regarding this industry, because of course the argument would be, oh, you're only telling one side of it, you've got a grudge, there's whatever the case is. So
no, we're showing the true face of what happens behind the walls in these facilities.
Right. So I want
the
to
other side is that pretty little brochure that everybody sees.
Of course. So I'm glad you were able to come on and kind of pull the covers a little bit on the troubled teen industry. Another shot at the I don't know what do you call it? It's like a warning shot over the bow. Like, because we're not going to give up, because kids have rights and they need to be protected.
Absolutely.
And they don't need to be shuttled off to some horrible place that.
Okay, isolate them. And one of my biggest gripes is the isolation. The human brain does not stop developing until you're into your mid-20s. And what they're doing is they're isolating these children. They're social isolating them. They're putting them in quote-unquote intervention, OSS, in these small little tiny boxes, and holding them there for weeks or months. I mean, that is psychological torture. That is literally defined as torture. We're not even allowed to use that in our prison systems. Prisoners have to come out at least an hour a day for exercise to get out of their cells. But these children aren't even allowed that.
Amazing. Wow. I think that's a good note to end this on, just because it's a real punch in the face. That's real.
Right? I like to do that.
That's really
Here's some information.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Lily. And can you go ahead and say the name of your website again, just so people can hear it clearly?
It is safeteenschools.org.
Safeteenschools.org.
That's right.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.